Hi, my name is Christopher Torres, and my first job was teaching swim lessons. I was in the summer of 2005, just after my sophomore year of high school, so I was 16 years old. I was an active swimmer and played water polo, so it was a perfect job for me. At the time I was making $9 an hour, which was pretty sweet for a high school kid. Some of my duties, as you would expect, were to teach the fundamentals of swimming, which included the different styles of strokes and breath control, and just the basic stuff, even treading water. But yeah, that was my first gig.
Hi, my first job was when I was 17 in Cincinnati, Ohio, at a Mexican fast food restaurant. I waited on people, I cooked, I cleaned, and I discovered burritos and chalupas and tacos and rice and beans and incredible new flavors, and made a lot of friends. It was great.
Good evening, and thank you for logging on to Hidden Histories, URBAN-15's monthly presentation that brings lost and hidden parts of San Antonio's arts and culture into light. Today also is Labor Day, a day dedicated to those people working to make the world a better place with their hands, their minds, and a dedication to community service. It's also September, and traditionally we have offered your videos of my first job. So tonight we have 6 new videos for our collection. I hope you enjoy them. The features tonight are really significant in our archive and our quest for finding more about San Antonio. We have Ceta Arts Project, which was the arts project funded by the federal government between 1977 and 1982. We'll have conversations with Alice Canastero Garcia, Roland Mazuka, Moises Olivo, all artists who were part of the Ceta project, and the director, Joe Long, former director of the Carver Community Cultural Center. Our second piece tonight is part of the Texana genealogy collection at the San Antonio Public Library. And we will feature Sylvia Reyna, a librarian and archivist, who has prepared some information on labor, the history of the West Side midwives. It's appropriate for today, and she will feature the 2 women, Ms. Ramos and Mrs. Bonilla, who had a home on Matamoros Street where they were midwives, and they would go to people's homes as well. The third section tonight is a celebration of the work of Petra and Viola Casares in creating Fuerza Unida, a support system for the 1,700 women who lost their jobs when the Levi's plant closed here in 1990. For 30 years, they have been providing family services, food, employment for these people, and they are a force to be reckoned with. Congratulations on your 30th anniversary. It's sad and bitter that you had to have this organization, but this is a unique organization that only women could do. So enjoy the show tonight. Happy Labor Day. Let's keep on working, make the world a better place. We'll see you at the end of the show.
it was a Sunday afternoon, the day of a concert. Clark Cherry was to perform. And I was reading the light, and I saw, hey, here, Clark Cherry at the Carver Center. And I hadn't heard of the Carver Center, So I said, well, where is the Carver Center? And of course, they had the address, 126 Hackberry. So I went to the concert, and I said, wow, this is a groovy thing going on. They got a good thing going on here. So after the concert was over, I went back the following day, and I walked in, and of course, one of the receptionists helped me. Said, can I help you? Yes, I'd like to speak to, one of the administrators. I'm here. I was at the concert last night, and I wanted to see how I could participate in furthering whatever it is that you're trying to promote from this facility. And they said, sure. So they introduced me to Susan. I can't think of her last name, but her name was Susan. Very pretty lady. And so we got to talk, and I said, hey, listen, I was at your concert last night, and but I would like to be involved in whatever it is that you have planned for the future. And she says, by the way, now that you say that, we do have something planned. You're the first individual to approach. We happen to have some grant monies that came in, the Ceta program. I have never heard of Ceta, but at the time it was being processed through the city of San Antonio. And I said, yeah, well, okay. What do I need to do? How can I get involved, starting today, And she says, well, we'll have to interview you. Okay, that's fine. Within a half an hour to 45 minutes later, the assistant administrative director came in. His name is Richard Kurtz. And so the two of them got together, and we sat down, and they started asking me questions like, what is it that you do? And I told them who I am, what I do, and that I'm a working musician. Yeah, I became a working musician away from home on the road around 71. And so they were asking me questions. How is it that you would benefit from our programs? I said, well, they told me what they wanted to do. We want to establish a dance program, all those assets, dance, theater, visual art, maybe poetry or something, but music, and the music they wanted to emphasize was jazz. I said, well, okay. I said, fine, that's great. I would like to participate, And then they asked me, what do I have to offer? What could I offer to give to the public or the community or those that wanted to participate in, let's say, the jazz program? I said, well, I can direct and teach any student on how to make a living at this. I can perhaps I could influence them and keep them off the streets and get them more involved in music through this facility, and they liked that very much. And then they asked me some other questions. I guess what my I think they asked me what were my qualifications as well. I've been a self-employed for the past 10-15 years, and not depending on any other government assistance. I've been making it on my own, and I think I feel that's pretty good. That's a pretty good record. A week later, they said, hey, you're hired, you're on, come on in, what are we gonna do? And then they said, well, you need to hire a staff of musicians. You need to hire, great, all right, I can hire a staff. This is, then they said, well, then they told me that we've had some, a group come by that they've been using the facility for rehearsals. I said, is that so? I said, well, how come you didn't ask one of them, They had been going, I believe they had been rehearsing there at the Carver on the stage for maybe a few weeks or a month or something, but they had already made their presence there. And I said, and who is it, And she says, well, it's a group they call themselves Home Cooking. I says, oh, really? Well, okay, we'll just take it. You have what's the instrumentation? She told me the instrumentation. I said, well, okay, you have a rhythm section, you have a whole band there, so why don't you just hire the group? He said, well, we can't hire them as a group. I said, okay, well, then I'll hire them individually. And that's what I did. I hired Home Cooking individually. So that Home Cooking was David Lukey on the woodwinds, reeds, and his brother Steve Lukey on guitar, Vance Villastrigo on piano, David Katakalos on bass. So there was those four, and then and at that time I was doing a lot of gigs, the society social big band gigs, around town with Felix Solis and Ramiro Cervera, and the orchestras at that time, Paul Elizondo, and so I had come in contact with a trumpet player that we got along real well with. So I hired him, Arturo Cisneros, good trumpet player. So we had two horns and a bass and a guitar and a piano player. And so at that time I was doing a lot of drumming. So I said, hey, it's it. I'm on drums, and we got a complete rhythm section and some horns. So let's go with that. And they said, yeah, okay, we're fine. So I got a hold of those guys, and they said, okay. So after 2 weeks, we had a resident ensemble, and he said, well, we just call it the Carver Jazz Ensemble.
I got a phone call from Jo Long. She invited me to a party to meet the other artists she had selected. There was some paperwork involved at some point, but we went to a party. We met each other, and then we showed up for work at the Carver Center. So my understanding is that Jo Long went all over San Antonio, sought out everybody that she thought could be an interesting artist, and looked at their work, went to their studios, and then invited them to do the paperwork, come in and work at the Carver Center. Artists being employed to work a 20-hour week that would provide a basic paycheck, and then have 20 hours to work on our own project. So it was like a 40-hour week in theory. But, well, that part was astounding. I never thought when I switched from psychology to fine arts as my major that I would ever actually get a for real artist job. So this at 24, 23, 24 was a dream come true. Oh yeah, Joe is 24, I was 23. And everybody, we're all just kids really. So it was hilarious. As part of the visual arts crew, we were informed ahead of time that we would have some graphic design work, that we have teaching in the community work, that we'd have assignments that in just the normal running of the Carver Center, like manning the spotlight or hanging a show, hanging an exhibit. And having the opportunity to work on our own individual projects. We were each member of the crew we knew what the upcoming performances would be or the exhibits would be, and we were all assigned well ahead of time to certain projects. So we had time to work out the concept, work out the drafts, get the final image together. I got to do the Amen Corner by James Baldwin, and to have a job where I was paid to study African artwork, African sculpture, on which I based the images in the poster and set it up in an open grid format. That was fabulous. That was so wonderful to do. We were involved, the visual artists were involved in some performances. Joe would tap us, she would just say, auditions next week on this day, and those of us who wanted to would audition. David Garcia was on the arts crew, visual artist. He worked mostly as a videographer and a performance coordinator as far as original art pieces that he did. Over time, I worked most closely with David Garcia, who we went on to become husband and wife. David went on to found Performance Artist Nucleus, the 501c3 that underlies the Guadalupe Cultural Center. That vision was the force of Performance Artist Nucleus. David Garcia was certainly one of the the innovators here in San Antonio as far as arts go.
I found out about the Ceta program through artist friends of mine. Alice Canastero and Rolando Briceño told me about it. I didn't really know anything about it, but the Carver was starting and I went there, and it was a very exciting time. I was hired right away. I was part of a team of 4 different Ceta artists. There was a dance company, and I think that there was maybe 6 artists that were hired in dance. The 4 from the visual artists, theater program with another 5, a jazz music program with probably the biggest component. I think there may have been 7 of those artists. When we were all hired, we were stuffed into the Carver, and it was the old Carver, so it was just the theater and that front area that's now the gallery. And our offices and Joe's office and the administration offices were all in that front part, with another 35 or 37 of us artists who were just scattered all over the place in the theater and in that front gallery area. It was pretty crazy meeting everybody. I've made lifelong friends there. I talked to Sherry Stratton. She was one of the visual artists there. And that was one of her points, that she said she'd made friends for life. I still see Jason Williams. He was one of the, and Magda Porter. They're both theater people. Jason has gone on to fame and fortune, taking a show he created around that time to Broadway. Probably what I remember most about the Ceta times in the Carver was just the crazy ferment of all these different groups. For me, the Ceta program, and certainly working at the Carver, influenced me to a great deal. I've, you know, as a Ceta artist, we were going to grade schools. I think I taught at a grade school, middle school, and high school, and probably some senior centers. I think for senior citizens, senior centers, we went as a team of a couple of artists, but the others, I was a sole artist, and I taught ceramics and printmaking and took different aspects of visual arts to students there and to the senior citizen centers. And I think that gave exposure to those people who would probably not have it, at least not have it from the perspective of a working artist. Having it from an artist, you get that experience of somebody who is living the work. That was very valuable. I went on to work in the nonprofit community, and I always valued, it wasn't for the money because that was not very good, but I always valued being able to contribute to society and give back to the community.
John Paul Batiste with the Texas Commission on the Arts had been made aware that they were looking for a director of the Carver Center in San Antonio. And they had interviewed quite a few people, but they were still searching. And they mentioned it to John Paul, and he said, well, I know someone who is directing a cultural center in Dallas. Maybe you could consider her. So they called, made arrangements for me to come in and interview. And at the time, they had a very active advisory board. So I met with 4 or 5 people. And following the interview, they offered me the position. And that's how I came to move here. The building was still closed and in a state of disrepair. They were waiting for equipment, and so for a while I officed at Hemisphere Plaza. I started hiring a staff as soon as I arrived. And I think I employed 5 people, and all of us were together in a room that was maybe the size of my office at Carver. And you know how small that was. We were always in very small spaces with lots of energy working. Well, I really knew about the Ceta program from Oscar Powell, who was in personnel, and he mentioned that this new federal program had been funded by the city, and inquired as to whether or not I was interested in making application for any of the positions the city had been awarded. And I said yes, and I asked for 30. Never in my wildest dream did I imagine I would actually be funded for 30 slots. The city had been assigned a certain number of positions and a certain dollar amount. So they were putting out notice to all departments that this was an opportunity and all you needed to do was request. And they funded the request on a first come, first served basis until they were out of slots. And of course, after I knew about it, I made sure to get my request in immediately. So I walked it over to Oscar Powell's office and handed it to him. I told a lot of people that we had these positions and we were going to be able to employ artists. But I did tell everybody I knew that we had positions that would be open by personnel and that they should contact the personnel department, not me. It was pretty hard. Well, for one thing, we were forming ensembles, so that helped. So you were not going to hire 5 trombonists. You weren't going to hire 5 clarinetists. So some of it was automatic in terms of elimination, because there were certain things we were looking for and we had to put those in the potential pile first. So that weeded out quite a few. Well, a typical day for me was sitting in my office writing and telling people, solve your own problem. And unless you can solve it, only bring it to me then. But the real goal is you figure it out. Well, now we identified spaces where the artists could be. We were definitely going to have musicians on the stage because of the noise factor. The visual artists could be almost anywhere because they needed quiet, so they could be up with the regular office staff, except they also had a lot of supplies. So that had to be taken into account. And the theater people, I think, just found a corner somewhere. It was hard trying to figure out the space, but it was very exciting, and the artists wanted to be a part of it, so they were willing to make the sacrifices of comfort. At one point, I moved out of my office and I worked in the green room so that people could have more space. There were people in the community who complained about it. They complained about the way the artists dressed. They dressed like artists. They didn't look like city employees in dresses and heels and suits and ties. I think the city was thoroughly shocked at what Carver became overall. They had low standards, such low standards for the Carver. They never expected that world-class musicians and artists and companies would perform on the Carver stage. They never expected that the most talented artists in the city would be employed by the Carver and would create work there. They thought Carver was going to be, let's see, how did they put it? An arts and crafts center. That's what I was told. And I said, no, it's not going to be an arts and crafts center if I have anything to do with it. It has to be bigger than that. And what I pointed to was the Carver's history, that it had always served as a major place for the country's most talented African Americans. When you consider Paul Laurence Dunbar was there, Mahalia Jackson was there, the greatest of greats who toured the country performed at Carver. And I said, you want to build on that kind of history. You don't want to diminish it.
Sylvia Reyna. I'm in Texana genealogy of the San Antonio Public Library. I'm an archivist librarian, and today we're going to feature the collection of the Ramos Bonilla Midwife Ledger books. This is the mother, and this is the daughter.
And she began her midwifery profession in 1908, and it spanned for 53 years in San Antonio. So we have a collection of birth records stemming from 1911 to 1971.
I first start seeing her, although I've read that she started in 1908. We found her in the 1912 city directories, and here she's noted as a midwife on West Nueva, and that's a thing. She was at different locations. This is 1926, and she's noted in the city directory at 315 Matamoros. In 61, we know the daughter, Bonilla. That's Agapita. She's listed here. And then the mother is not listed. And she's like already retiring from midwife. The Ramos did some like 1,500 births. It's estimated.
What you can find from this specific collection is what was donated to the San Antonio Public Library by Mrs. Bonilla's children. That was Louis and Alfred Bonilla, Hortensia King, Josephine O'Rourke, and an extended family member, Patty Silva. And so we have pictures in there, we have newspaper clippings, and very importantly, we have the Midwife Ledgers. And those are 5 books that have information on the children that they birthed here in San Antonio. And it has the child's name, the mother's name, the father's name, the date, and that sort of information. And when we're doing the validation or going back and forth as in what does this record say and where else is it found, very laborious process when we're researching, because it entails looking at subscription databases that we have, such as Access Newspaper Archives, where it has old newspapers, and that's where I found advertisements for Mrs. Ramos as a midwife. I look in city directories, whether it's a physical book or whether it's microfilm, and looking at that address where the house was situated, the midwife's house. Also look at Access News, Ancestry. I look at Ancestry, and that's another way. Within the collection, there was a little birth certificate in there, and was like, why are there some birth certificates in here? And it's because she had birthed three children, triplets. So that's one of the things also then I start looking for an ancestry, and sure enough, they were in there, and they're also listed in her book. She was very good about then taking that information. You have to take it to Bexar County, to the health authorities to take that and make it official. And so it wasn't just in her books, it's in other books. And that's another thing, if anyone's doing any type of research on midwives in San Antonio, we have a couple of books, and one of them is another midwife that was Midwife's Registry, and it was Romo. And these midwives were in the west side of San Antonio. They're listed in city directories. And fortunately, we have this other book for anyone doing that sort of research. We also have this other book that is the Mexican American and Anglo Midwifery in San Antonio, which is part of a study that a student did, get the dissertation on this on the same subject of midwifery. And of course, we've got the collection back here. These are the ones that were donated to us by the family. This is that the midwifery played a significant role in promoting healthy practices for the mother and the child from pre-pregnancy, and also in assisting her patients to become stronger advocates for their own health. So they also played the role of a physician. And sometimes the mothers couldn't afford to go to the hospital, and they would go to the midwifery houses for not just for the babies, but for the health. And they played a real important role in the health care of these women. And unfortunately, some of them couldn't afford to go to the hospital. And that's the major role that they played in helping the individuals as they're having their babies, their health issues, is to go see the midwifery.
This here would have been the street, Matamoros, where the midwife's maternity house would have been, but our most maternity house right here in Matamoros. It doesn't show it here, but it's the street right here. Like in 61, she was already she wasn't doing it anymore.
It has been estimated that Ramona Ramos birthed about 1,500 babies.
It's estimated. I have the obituary, the tribute here for her. She died in 1968, and this is where it talks about her history.
It's really neat because we've had patrons that have come in, like doing ancestral work, or we have like Juan Tejeda that came in doing work on his brother's book, Frank Tejeda, and then also doing his ancestral work. And he was looking for an individual. And we couldn't at first find a birth certificate, but I remember we had the midwife's books. And lo and behold, from taking it from that year, we found her inside, listed in the book. It was Alicia Cisneros, and she's listed in there inside the book. So that's always very, very significant, and it's very rewarding for the individual who's looking for an ancestor, who's looking for a family member. And in this other book with Ramos, the same thing with Roman. I found another individual looking for an individual. They hadn't found their information, and it has the a little birth certificate listed in here.
These are little birth certificates, but this is a different midwife. Her name is Romo, and she did a lot of birthing once again in the west side of San Antonio.
research methodology is very laborious, and unfortunately right now, the public does not have access. But you can ask the questions, and we can go in and do the research for you. And Texana genealogy is a reference-only collection, so if it was open, you can't check out the books, but you can come in here, you sign out for them, and then you can look through the records. But the same thing with the subscription databases. You have to be on one of our computers to access the subscription databases. But if you had a person that you were looking for, you can write to us at genealogydesk@sanantonio.gov and ask your question, and we can start looking for that information. And one of the things is that this information from this midwives collection is going to go on TARO, which is the Texas Archival Resources Online, and it's through Austin, and they're going to be out there, and it'll give you the finding aid, and that'll give you a glimpse of index of everything that's in this collection. And then it has the dates, and that way if you had an individual that you're looking for, and that would be the thing, it's like, well maybe that person might be in here, but like you would have to have always a person's name, of course, and an estimate of the date. And then we end up doing that research, at least for now, because of the COVID, that people are not allowed to come into the department, actually into the library, at least for now. Our office dates were from Tuesday to Saturday. We had people that would come in from out of town because they're here for the weekend, and not everything is digitized, and that's the thing. I know everybody thinks, oh, just go online, but it's not. They have to come into the department. But one of the things is that what we do is we scan information these days. So even because our books are reference only, so that means they have to come in anyway. And if you get some folks from out of town, you get the same service where then we look at the information, we scan it, we digitize it, we send them an email, give them that information back to them. And of course, we'd also get the people that don't have computers. Not everyone has a computer, and it'd be we would scan it, we print it out, and they'd get a physical copy of whatever it is that we're looking for. And any time that we're doing the research, we always give them the citation, where we got it. Is it from the San Antonio Light? Is it from the San Antonio Express? What was the date? What was the page number? Is it from, and some of that, like from Access Newspaper Archives? Is it from the microfilm? We give all that information, or just whatever book it was from.
The Ramos maternity home, which once stood here, was demolished in the 1970s due to urban renewal. But the stories live on. To all those who have come before us, to the parteras, the midwives who helped give birth to all those children, and these midwives' records, and to their children, the descendants who donated their rich, valuable cultural collection to the Texana genealogy of the San Antonio Public Library for archival preservation, and to the Hidden Histories program, thank you.
My name is Donna Gregory. My first job was in 1984 at the Dairy Queen in Mathis, Texas. I was 16 years old, made about $5 an hour, and my duties included taking orders at the front desk as well as the drive-through window, and I would also prepare the drink orders, which included making shakes, and the shake process is definitely a learning process. I permanently modified several of my solid white shirts at the time. And the other duty I had, which was my least favorite, was having to clean both the women's and the men's bathrooms.
My first job was at Dairy Queen. I grew up in an unincorporated area, sort of a semi-rural area, so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure, and Dairy Queen was, I guess, one of the only chains out there, one of the few job opportunities. And I started working there when I was 16. I got paid $5.50 an hour, I think, which was minimum wage at the time. And some funny things that happened there. Well, this first one is not funny, but I was one of the best people at making the little curl on the top of the ice cream cones because I'm good with my hands. So that's one thing. And then a couple funny things, and then this thing's not funny either, is one of my coworkers in conversation, just coworker to coworker conversation, she casually mentioned to me that she would never marry would never marry a Hispanic person, which is what I am. And so basically after talking to her for a few minutes more, I realized she was a racist. Just a regular person, but also a racist without even realizing. So, anyways.
All right. You know what I remember about your job, Miguel?
What?
I remember, like, after the first summer you worked there,
Uh-huh.
like, there was a rumor around in our circle that you had made $1,000 over the summer, and
Okay.
everybody's jaws were just, like, dropping because it was an unheard of sum.
Oh, well, my mom made me save money, so I believe that was true.
Bueno, este año 2020 estamos conmemorando los 30 años de servir a nuestra comunidad y de organizar a trabajadores, a mujeres y también incluyendo jóvenes. Esta organización empezó se formó en 1990. A raíz de un cierre de planta de Levi's, de 3 plantas que tenían aquí. La de nosotros era la que tenía más trabajadores, 1,150 trabajadores. Un 78% éramos mujeres, la mayoría latinas. Bueno, cuando perdimos el trabajo, cada una de las trabajadoras o trabajadores tenían diferente situación económica, diferente situación de educación. La mayoría no sabíamos el lenguaje del inglés. La mayoría no habíamos ido a un nivel elevado de educación. Por eso es que se nos fue tan difícil sobrevivir a ese trauma, porque para nosotros fue un trauma.
Digo, yo creo que fue diferente porque en lo mío, ese mismo día que anunciaron el cierre de la planta, ese mismo día a mí me dejaron ir, solo que yo no estaba preparada, yo les digo que cuando me llevaron luego para la oficina, yo miré que ahí tenían un montón de papeles donde ellos ya estaban preparados y nosotros no estábamos preparados para ese cierre, solo que de veras fue un shock para nosotros, para muchas mujeres, porque no estábamos preparadas para este cierre. Y fue un anuncio de la noche a la mañana. Las supervisors a ellas les dijeron una noche antes que iban a cerrar.
Primeramente, cuando yo fui criada por mis abuelitos paternos, mi abuelito me inculcó que yo aprendiera a coser. Mi abuelito me enseñó a cocinar. Mi abuelito y mis tías me enseñaron a lavar en tallador, a hacer tortillas y a cocinar en general, ¿verdad? Entonces, pero mi abuelito quería que yo tuviera algo, ¿verdad? Algo de alguna profesión. Y él me inculcó, me mandaba a una casa, a un lugar donde enseñaban costura, ¿verdad? Entonces, por allí vino el interés, ¿verdad? De que yo me quería hacer mis vestidos, mis faldas, mis blusas y todo eso. Pero desafortunadamente después tuve que empezar a trabajar y a ganar dinero para traer a mi casa, ¿verdad? Pero entonces hubo esa oportunidad de que Levi's estaba buscando costureras. Entonces yo apliqué. Como por ejemplo, ahora apliqué y ya para mañana me estaban entrevistando y que empezara ya el lunes y ya empecé. Primero fui como costurera. Me parece que por 4 años. Me dieron la oportunidad de ser entrenadora. Y al final, cuando cerraron, ya me habían hecho supervisora, ¿verdad? A pesar de que yo no tenía una educación y todo eso. Pero yo pasé por mucha discriminación, porque yo sentía que Levi's era mi Dios. Pero ¿sabe por qué? Porque ellos no lavaban el coco, como quien dice, el pensamiento, ¿me entiende? Ellos nos manipulaban a que entre más hacía la gente, más quería que hiciéramos. Y por eso, por ese lado fue de que yo me interesé un poco en la costura.
Well, well, to tell you the truth, actually, I don't know much about sewing. When I used to work at Levi's, I only would sew the little patch in one of the packets. That's all I did. That's all I sewed. But I remember when I was small, my mother would make us dresses out of those vests where the flower came, the flower and the so she would make dresses for us. And I also remember one of my sisters learning how to sew with dolls, making dresses for the dolls. I guess she taught me how to sew, and I taught her about organizing and things like that, because we used to sit in she already passed away, but every morning we would drink coffee, and I would talk to her about the struggle of what I was doing, how I was traveling, and and she would ask questions, and she also got to know more about the struggle. Because in her times, she didn't know, my mom didn't know she had rights. My mom couldn't speak very good English, and but like my son, like my grandson, we would speak about the struggle. We would how what Levi's did to us, and then and later on she would hear stuff with her friends, and she would comment about what we had talked the day earlier, about things that were happening in our community. So I learned from her, and she learned from me, my mom, in reference to struggling and about organizing. I think because she also was raised. She lost her mom at a very young age. And she didn't have much of an education, but I guess in the way we learn from each other, me from her and her from me, about what's going on, in the reference to the Levi, the boycott and organizing. In that time, because like I said, I came from a domestic violence, environment, So when I started when I was at Levi's, by the time Levi's closed down, I was already separated from my husband, and I started to work because I wanted to have a better living, better things, and to pay better education for my girls and my son, So I started working there in 1990. But actually in 92, my husband passed away because of alcoholic, and also the plant in 90 had closed down. So I was a widow. I had no husband. So I was the one that did a lot of traveling, because
there was somebody to tell me anything. I could come and go and be out of the house, for so many weeks, because I was a single mom, and my kids were already grown up. Sometimes I remember my daughter saying at work when she worked, they were saying, "How's your mom?" I don't know. I haven't seen her for 2 or 3 weeks. They, but y'all live together. Yeah, but she's out traveling. She's out fighting for justice. She would tell them.
Yo al principio sí tuve muchos problemas, ¿ok? Con mi esposo, porque al principio de la lucha, de la formación de Fuerza Unida, sí tenía muchos problemas con mi esposo porque pues yo tenía que dejar los niños solos, yo no llegaba a tiempo para hacerle a cenar. Como le digo, al principio mi esposo era un poco machista, ¿verdad? Eso yo creo nunca se les va a quitar. Lo único que pasa es que nosotros los tenemos que educar, ¿verdad? Entonces, sí teníamos problemas, ¿verdad? Pero ya después fue cambiando cuando miraba lo que hacíamos, que era importante, ¿verdad? Ya, gracias a Dios, me apoya 100%. Mis hijos también me dicen que están bien orgullosos de mí, del trabajo que hacemos, ¿verdad? Y todo lo que hemos durado en esta lucha. También se están educando, ¿verdad? De cosas, porque tenemos pláticas sobre mi trabajo y lo que está pasando aquí en Fuerza Unida y todo, y ellos se contagian del entusiasmo mío de que hago este trabajo y que me gusta, ¿verdad? Y que si por mí, si yo no tuviera ese entusiasmo por esta organización, lo que nos ha costado estos 30 años, yo probablemente ya, porque he pasado por muchos problemas de salud difíciles, pero no sé, me llena de corazón hacer este trabajo cuando podemos hablar con una mujer, que tiene problemas, que podemos ayudarla, a lo mejor no económicamente, pero moralmente, y eso me llena mucho de satisfacción. Yo creo que cuando empezamos este programa de jóvenes, sentimos que era necesidad porque ya habíamos organizado trabajadores, ya habíamos hecho todo lo que podíamos alcanzar a hacer, ¿verdad? Y esto limitadamente por el sistema que estaba bien mal conducido, ¿verdad? Entonces dijimos, ok, bueno, ¿qué más vamos a hacer? Entonces fue cuando empezamos a desarrollar el programa de jóvenes. Sentimos que los jóvenes aquí podían aprender un liderazgo, ¿verdad? Para el futuro, porque muchas de las veces en la familia porque los papás, ¿verdad? No tienen el tiempo de hablar con ellos sobre lo que está pasando afuera de sus propios hogares o afuera de su escuela. Y en la escuela también no les enseñan, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, a ser líderes de tu comunidad, a apoyar a tu prójimo, a respetar, a tener buenas maneras de tratar a personas adultas, ¿verdad? Entonces, allí emprendimos nosotros los programas de jóvenes. Y gracias a Dios nos ha dado resultado, porque los jóvenes aprenden, ¿verdad?, de nosotros, de las experiencias de nosotros como organizadoras después de 30 años, pero también les extendemos la información política, violencia doméstica, emigración, lo que sea, ¿verdad? Temas familiares. Y todo eso parece que nos ha a nosotros hecho empoderarlos a ellos mismos.
Because we always say when we do our presentations, that the young kids today are the future of tomorrow. So it's very important for them to understand that even if you don't have a good language or you don't know how to speak, it's very important to speak out, and fight against this injustice, because, like I said, we were not organized, we were garment workers, and it's important for them to know what's all the injustice is going on. They have a voice to speak out, And now, things are, instead of going, I think, getting better, it's like they're getting worse right now. So for us, it's very important our youth to know the reality of what happens, when you lose your job or any kind of job. It's very important for them to know, and they do got a voice. They need to speak out and get organized. Getting organized is very important.
Y probablemente en esta lucha de 30 años no hemos hecho diferencias o triunfos grandes, pero para nosotros cada triunfo chiquito que hacemos en una persona o en nuestra comunidad es un triunfo grande. ¿Por qué? Porque lo hacemos con humildad, con compañerismo y entendemos a nuestra gente. Aprendimos a escuchar. Gracias a Dios, por una parte, por algo pasan las cosas, que perdimos el trabajo, pero mira todo lo que ganamos, Marisol, todo lo que ganamos, toda esta gente que hemos apoyado, todos estos jóvenes que hemos desarrollado, estos trabajadores que les hemos dicho, hemos platicado con ellos de nuestras experiencias y ellos se han empoderado como seres humanos y como trabajadores también. Y yo creo que ese es el triunfo más grande que nosotros hemos tenido. Y que todavía, después de 30 años, todavía estamos aquí, estamos con la misma mentalidad, maybe not con la misma fuerza física, pero mentalmente estamos abiertos a la realidad, porque aquí hablamos de la realidad y planeamos cómo poder cooperar con nuestros miembros y con nuestra comunidad para que sean mejores los dolores que están pasando, así como nosotros hace 30 años pasamos.
Pero me siento muy orgullosa de que ya no soy la mujer que era antes, hace 30 años, porque después, cuando me separé de mi esposo, él se quería juntar conmigo. Yo le dije que no, que porque yo ya no era la misma persona que él estaba impuesto a manejar y decidir por mí todo, que yo dije que ya no nuestro matrimonio no va a ser igual, y pues también como tenía su problema de alcohol. Pero a mí Fuerza Unida me ha enseñado mucho que me ha enseñado. Yo creo que más me ha enseñado es a ser humilde, tener compasión por la gente, porque cuando yo trabajaba con Levi's, yo trabajaba, Viola hacía buen dinero, que le importaba lo que estaba alrededor. Pero a mí Fuerza Unida me ha enseñado mucho. Estoy muy orgullosa de lo que he aprendido, de la gente que ha conocido, de los niños que he conocido, porque yo me dio la oportunidad de viajar a Brasil, a Sudáfrica, a Cuba, a Centroamérica, y de ver las mujeres, como en cualquier parte que estén las mujeres luchan. Nosotros las mujeres somos bien luchistas, y sí podemos hacer cambios en nuestra comunidad, porque nosotros lo hemos visto aquí con nosotros, porque no nomás es Viola, no nomás es Petra, fuimos 1,150 trabajadoras, y todas ellas yo estoy segura que han aprendido algo de esa lucha, y nos han hecho más humanos, y como digo, especialmente de oír, de escuchar, porque cuando una persona entra aquí a Fuerza Unida, nosotros sabemos cómo oírlas y cómo entenderlas. Y mucha gente que viene aquí a Fuerza Unida dice que nomás entran a este espacio y que sienten algo muy bonito, que se sienten a gusto, y eso es lo que a nosotros nos llena, de oír la fina de la gente, que estamos dispuestos para la gente que venga, la que sea, que uno les puede dar un consejo. Aquí en Fuerza Unida nos reemos, lloramos, chismeamos, como dicen, y todo, pero para nosotros sí es aquí un espacio familia. Bueno, Iba decía que éramos familia, pero no nos trataron como familia, nomás les dio su gana y nos botaron fuera, no les importó. Y aquí en Fuerza Unida yo siento que sí somos una familia, porque sabemos de dónde viene la gente, es nuestra comunidad, es con la gente que nos hemos creado.
Do you ever think that men will ever get organized enough to form an organization as strong as yours?
Bueno, mi punto de vista, para decirle la verdad, creo que no. Voy a serle sincera, porque los hombres se enojan, los hombres gritan, los hombres quieren, I'm sorry to say it, pero quieren imponer sus conocimientos. Y nosotros como mujeres no nos vamos a dejar manipular por hombres machistas, ni que nadie nos diga what to do. We do whatever we can en nuestra experiencia, en nuestra manera, ¿verdad? Nuestras aptitudes y nuestros conocimientos, ¿verdad? Sí apoyamos al hombre, no me tomen mal. Sí los apoyamos, los queremos, porque yo, mi esposo, mis hijos, mis nietos, mis yernos, todos ellos, ¿verdad? Y todos los hombres que nos apoyan. Pero nosotros queremos ser nosotros, que las decisiones, que los planes, que la dirección y nuestra historia alumbre en estos tiempos para poner nuestra voz y nuestro voto. Y eso es lo que queremos. Seguir luchando para tener una posición, un espacio en este sistema que nos oprime como mujeres.
I hope you enjoyed our Hidden Histories tonight. It is always a pleasure to bring you new material, and it is always important for you to be in contact with us, sending your thoughts, your ideas, and content, so we can continue Hidden Histories into the future. Next month, October, we will be featuring films by local students as part of the Josiah Media Festival. We look forward to seeing you the first Monday of October 2020. Good night.
Back in 1976, San Antonio, I made $2.30 as a file clerk at Gibson's Discount Center. My boss was my dad, Keith McCrary, so I had to show up no matter how I felt. What I liked most about the job was the friends I made.
You talking about the Italian restaurant?
Was that your first job?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, it's not very interesting. I got a job in a warehouse organizing boxes for jewelry or something, and I went for a week maybe, and I never went back.
How old were you?
14 or 15. But
How much did they pay you?
I have no idea.
Did you even pick up the check?
I don't know. It was probably good. I think it was one of those things like my mom knew this person and they gave me a job. I'd rather talk about my second job. I never wanted to do this interview.